from buying Nvidia's AI chips. Beijing, responding to reports, said it's willing to maintain dialogue to keep global industrial and supply chains stable. Meanwhile, US and Chinese negotiators recently completed 3 days of talks in Madrid on tariffs, export controls, and TikTok's future, following up on earlier rounds of talks. US President Donald Trump earlier said a deal has been reached on TikTok's sale, and he is expected to finalize it when he speaks with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Friday.
Clashes have erupted again on the Thai-Cambodian border. Thai police fired tear gas and rubber bullets at Cambodian civilians on Wednesday in a disputed area, the worst escalation since a ceasefire ended 5 days of deadly fighting in July.
Cambodia says at least 23 of its citizens were hurt. Thailand confirmed its own officials were injured but gave no numbers. The violence broke out in a settlement claimed by both countries. Phnom Penh accuses Bangkok of crossing the border and using excessive force. Thailand says its officers were provoked by some 200 Cambodians dismantling barriers and throwing stones. Thailand and Cambodia have disputed stretches of their 817-kilometer border for more than a century. Tensions boiled over in July, sparking the fiercest fighting in decades. At least 48 people were killed and thousands displaced. The clashes ended with a Malaysia-brokered ceasefire on July 28th, which has largely held until now. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet has appealed to world leaders and ASEAN, warning Thailand's actions risk escalating tensions and widening the conflict.
Stay tuned for more after the break. Welcome back. France is bracing for one of its biggest strikes in years. Trade unions have joined forces to pressure Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu over budget cuts, wages, pensions, and public services. Up to 800,000 people are expected to take to the streets nationwide, with transport, schools, and air travel likely to be disrupted.
Authorities have deployed 80,000 police and 250 marches are planned across the country. The demonstrations come just days after Lecornu, a close ally of President Emmanuel Macron, took office as France's third prime minister in a year, following the ousting of François Bayrou over a €44 billion austerity plan. Lecornu has promised to drop Bayrou's unpopular plan to scrap 2 public holidays. But unions worry other austerity measures like freezes on welfare spending could still go ahead. Lecornu has only weeks to present a budget and form a minority government amid a divided parliament and repeated deadlocks. France's economy, the second largest in the EU, is under pressure to cut a deficit nearly double the bloc's 3% limit, with debt at 114% of GDP.
Several Arab Gulf states have followed the U.S. Federal Reserve, cutting interest rates for the first time this year. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and Oman all lowered their benchmark rates by a quarter point, just after the Fed made the same move.
The Fed's move ends nearly a year of holding steady on rates. Policymakers in the Gulf typically follow Washington's lead since their currencies are pegged to the US dollar. Lower borrowing costs are expected to give a boost to the region's housing market, especially for mortgages and property loans. Fed officials say 2 more rate cuts could still be on the table before the year is out.
Saudi Arabia and nuclear-armed Pakistan have signed a formal mutual defense pact in a move that strengthens a decades-long security partnership. The agreement comes amid rising tensions and growing doubts over the reliability of the United States as the long-standing security guarantor in the region. Israel's attack on Qatar last week heightened those concerns.
The agreement was signed in Riyadh by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, with Pakistan's army chief also present. Saudi officials say the deal isn't aimed at any specific country. Under the agreement, any aggression against one country is considered an attack on both. Gulf monarchies, long U.S. allies, have tried to balance ties with both Iran and Israel to manage regional security. But the Gaza war has shaken the region, and Qatar has faced direct attacks twice this year, once from Iran, once from Israel. The Saudi Pakistan Defense Pact comes just months after Pakistan's brief military clash with rival India in May, highlighting growing tensions across South Asia and the Middle East.
Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara says the outcome of security talks with Israel could be announced in the coming days. He called the proposed deal essential, insisting it must protect Syrian airspace and territorial unity under United Nations supervision.
The negotiations aim to halt Israeli airstrikes and secure the withdrawal of troops from southern Syria. Shara said Israel has carried out more than 1,000 strikes and over 400 incursions since December, when Syrian forces ousted former leader Bashar al-Assad. He warned that such actions contradict Washington's policy of supporting a stable, unified Syria, with the U.S. pushing for a deal to be finalized before next week's UN General Assembly. Shara said that a security pact could open the door to future agreements, but stressed that peace or normalization deals like the Abraham Accords was not on the table.
The UK is expected to formally recognize a Palestinian state over the weekend, according to British daily The Times. The move is likely to come right after President Donald Trump wraps up his state visit. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has already signaled he would push ahead with recognition ahead of the UN General Assembly later this month, citing Israel's failure to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Starmer has repeatedly clashed with Trump over the issue, with the US president firmly opposing official recognition. Australia, France, and Canada have also hinted they may recognize a Palestinian state. Right now, 147 of the UN's 193 member states already recognize Palestine. World leaders will gather in New York for high-level meetings at the UN General Assembly on September 23rd. China's defense minister says a stronger Chinese military is a greater force for peace. Speaking at the Xiangshan Forum in Beijing, Dong Jun said a more capable People's Liberation Army enhances China's ability to deter conflict and support global peace and development.
He described the Chinese military as a stabilizing force aligned with the UN's vision of lasting peace, pledging that Beijing will uphold the post-war international order while rejecting exclusive military blocs and alliances. Dong also stressed that disputes must be resolved through dialogue and by addressing their root causes. The Xiangshan Forum, launched in 2006 as China's answer to international security dialogues, has grown in prominence, drawing about 1,800 delegates attended from nearly 100 countries.
The European Union aims to finalize a trade deal with India before the end of the year. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the move is needed as rising United States tariffs is pushing the bloc to diversify its economy.
Speaking in Berlin, she said Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi had given his personal commitment during a phone call the previous day. Von der Leyen also confirmed that talks were underway with South Africa, Malaysia, the United Arab Emirates, and several other countries. This came as the US now imposes a 15% tariff on most EU goods, with steel and aluminium facing even higher rates.
Nvidia is throwing its weight behind the struggling U.S. chip maker Intel with a $5 billion investment. The agreement is expected to challenge Taiwan's TSMC, which currently manufactures Nvidia's most advanced processors.
Under the new partnership, Intel would design custom CPUs for data centers, which Nvidia would combine with its GPUs using proprietary links for faster communication. These faster connections were seen as crucial for artificial intelligence, where multiple chips must work together on massive datasets. Following the news, Intel shares jumped 12% in pre market trading, while Nvidia rose 2%. The investment also made Nvidia one of Intel's largest shareholders, likely holding more than 4% of the company.
Cuba's foreign minister urges the United Nations to act against what he describes as the United States' militarization in the Caribbean. Bruno Rodriguez warns that Washington's military buildup could spark conflict under the guise of fighting drug cartels.
He called on both the UN General Assembly and the Security Council to uphold their responsibilities under the UN Charter, stressing the need to preserve peace and prevent escalation in the region. He also claimed the United States itself remained the world's main financial hub for laundering assets tied to the drug trade. Tensions had risen sharply between Washington and Venezuela, Cuba's closest ally, after U.S. strikes destroyed three Venezuelan boats allegedly carrying narcotics. Since taking office, U.S. President Donald Trump had tightened sanctions, reinstated Cuba on the list of state sponsors of terrorism, and imposed new financial and travel restrictions. Rodriguez blamed the measures for fueling Cuba's deepest economic crisis in decades, with shortages, collapsing infrastructures, and soaring inflation.
Brazil's beef exports to the United States declined further in September, according to the head of Brazil's Beef Exporters Association, ABIEC. The head of the group, Roberto Perosa, says the drop follows higher tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump on Brazilian goods.
He added that shipments to the US were expected to reach about 7,000 metric tons in September, down from around 9,000 tons in August. Before the tariffs took effect in August, exports had averaged 30,000 tons a month. The United States had been Brazil's second largest beef buyer after China, but following new tariffs, Mexico has now taken that spot. Washington imposed a 50% levy on several Brazilian products, on top of an existing 26.4% tax on beef imports outside the quota. Perosa said losing the US as a major market was a significant setback, though insisting that Brazilian exports remain competitive, even under a combined tariff of 76.4%.
That wraps up AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the rivalries, strategies, and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more, head on to international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. I am Cynthia Ng. Thank you for watching and good night.